Come here. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. All right. Welcome. Good boy. Good boy. All right. Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video, and that's where we pick from each week. I think Steph has written down like 24 questions, something like that, from this past week. You may be able to see Holly right down here. I'm shooting this inside. You can see my breath. It's 27 degrees or something this morning, getting quite a bit colder this upcoming week. I've got a couple questions about that. Griffin's right here beside me on the sofa. Let's see. I announced in Friday's 5-minute video the open garden for this year. It's going to be, I think, June 20th and 21st, and we're dividing it into 3 sections of Friday evening, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon. It's going to be ticketed this time. Last year we had a lot of people, and I mean really a lot of people here, and it was like near 100 degrees, and I think if it hadn't been near 100 degrees, we'd have had an overwhelming number of people here. So I've ticketed it this time. And the tickets are over on the website at HortTube.com. You can either pick Friday evening, Saturday morning, or Saturday evening. Your choice. We'll have the same giveaways that we had last year, hopefully even more. Companies will participate in the free giveaways. We'll have t-shirts for sale like we did last year. Everything else will be the same, except for the garden will be very different in a lot of different ways, because we're going to move a lot of things around. And we'll have all new annual and perennial displays here for folks to see. It's $25. $10 of that $25 is going to be split between the J.C. Ralston Arboretum and the Gardens of Southeastern North Carolina, where we're doing that project down in Wallace, North Carolina. So some of the money is going to gardens in our area here in North Carolina. So that information, again, is over on the website at HortTube.com in the store. You just have to go to the store, and you'll see t-shirts and I think the only things that are in the store are t-shirts, gift cards, and the open garden, the 3 choices for the open garden. But when it went up Friday, I think there's already like 50 people or something just since Friday, and that video wasn't watched all that much. So I imagine that before the day's over with, there'll be a lot of tickets sold. So keep that in mind. I think I've limited it overall to 600 tickets. Kids under 12 are free. Okay, I think that's everything I needed to say on the open garden. I got January up on the weekly garden planner this past week. I'm sorry I was a little late getting that done, but we've already shot February. I hope to get that done in the next week or 2, and then we will have completed the calendar year for the weekly garden planner, which is another thing that's on the website, and we're going to get to work filling it out more. So every month is going to get additional content as the year goes on, and that's the same thing on the Learn to Garden video series. We've got lots of content planned for both of those. It's been nice to get this kind of the groundwork for the entire calendar year for the weekly garden planner done, because now we can jump into it and the Learn to Garden video series and beef them up with additional content. Okay, let's see. And the sale ended on the $50 off on the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series, but there's still discounts down below the videos for $25 and $20 off if you're still interested in getting them. Okay. So let's jump into some gardening questions. Will superior plants be at both weekends of the Pine Knot open houses? So the Pine Knot open houses are the middle February and late February. So it's the 14th and 15th and the 21st and 22nd. Yeah, definitely. He's always at that sale. And there's a few other interesting folks that are at that sale as well. There was, I don't know if they're coming this year, but like Putnam County Nursery was one that was there a couple of years ago. And there's just, Pine Knot is mainly a hellebore grower, and it's a hellebore display in that last 2 weeks in February when the hellebores are blooming. So it's a fun trip to make. It's on the North Carolina-Virginia border. We've made that trip up there a couple times. Shot a video on this channel and then on Bree and my channel a few years ago, showing how the hellebore breeding takes place at Pine Knot. But then they invite other people that have specialty plants to display during that week. And then the same person asked, does he have any Camellia azalea hybrids? I don't know that he's growing any, but there are a lot of, and then he also asked if he's related to Ted Stevens, because that's Jason Stevens. No, they're not related. I don't think Jason has any Camellia Azalea hybrids yet. There's a bunch coming to market, though. I know that Garden Treasures has a few, and there's an entire brand, I think, coming of Camellia Azalea hybrids. And I know this sounds crazy. There's a camellia with a species named Azalea. It's going to be the most confusing thing. It's not a cross between a camellia and azalea in any way. So we have Camellia sasanquas that are fall blooming camellias, and the Camellia japonicas that can be kind of fall or spring, winter blooming camellias. Camellia sinensis is tea, that we drink tea. So there's a lot of species of camellia, okay? This is just another species of camellia called Camellia Azalea. It's the most confusing thing. It's going to be super confusing once there's 20 of them out on the market, because they're coming pretty quick. Interesting breeding in that species that we're going to see, but I don't think Jason has any of them yet. But there's going to be lots of them coming. Let's see. Somebody suppose they're in Durham. They've got Xeon zoysia sod that was laid down. It's one of the hybrid zoysia grasses. It's a really good one. And it's supposed to be sprayed with chemicals, for weeds and other things. Is there any organic pet safe product instead? Is there a way to facilitate the spread? Should they pull weeds on the edges periodically? Yeah, you should definitely get rid of as many weeds as you can. The nice thing about these warm season grasses and some of these hybrid grasses, and the reason you see so much Bermuda grass going in the southeast, is because they're pretty self-repairing for the most part. They're better at competing with weeds than other grasses, but still not great. I mean, obviously you're still going to get weeds in them. In terms of facilitating the spread of it, you can get one of those pro pluggers, or there are various ways that you can take plugs from your own. The dogs. Griffin just opened the door and went inside, and Holly is following him. Let's close that door. Okay, go ahead.
You want any of those?
No, thank you. And the dog decided it was too cold out here, and Steph handed me 2 more coats if I need them. Let's see. So in terms of facilitating the spread of the grass a little more, you can get a plugger and just plug from within your own turf into other areas. So it's pretty easy. You can look up, how to do that. But that pro plugger works really well for that, because you can pull a bunch of plugs out of your lawn, and then dig the holes easily as well to put them in. And then you take the soil from the new hole and fill it back into your lawn area. In terms of, spraying something, you're not going to control weed. There's nothing organic that's going to control weeds. There's some cornmeal products that are out there that are supposed to prevent some weeds from germinating. You can experiment with that kind of stuff if you want to. Corn is supposed to produce some chemicals that prevent other weeds from germinating. You can look into those products if you want to, but there's no organic way to have a monoculture of any kind in your garden. That's not going to be a long-term possibility. If you decide you want to put all one shrub in your garden, or one type of turf, or one type of anything, eventually something is going to be problematic within that's going to cause an issue with it. That's just the way it is. Nature doesn't work very well with monocultures, where something just completely dominates something. It just doesn't work that way. Those weeds are opportunistic plants that they're finding a spot where the sun and the rain, combined, and they got good conditions for them to be able to grow, whether it's dandelions or crabgrass or, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. Just opportunistic plants that are taking advantage of a thin spot in your lawn or whatever, and they're going to grow. And they either have to be hand pulled or they have to be sprayed. There's no other real options. Again, you can try that cornmeal things. But I did get all kinds of questions. So another thing that's going to go on the weekly garden planner will be more turf related things this year too. But there's no great answer, unfortunately, for if you want a perfect lawn. Unless you're going to bend over and pull all the weeds yourself by hand, you're probably going to be spraying something if you want that perfect, the American dream of the green lawn. Are there negatives to using chip drop versus triple shredded hardwood mulch on the whole landscape? They thought they might save money. The wood chips, there's certain areas that I probably wouldn't use the wood chips as my mulch. So the negatives are the wood chips aren't quite as attractive and there's some variability in it. So it could be multiple different kinds of trees mixed up into the single load, or one load might be one particular tree and then the next load is completely different kinds of trees. Obviously there's some possibility that, there could be poison ivy and the 900 other questions I get about, bad things that could happen from getting chip drop, brought to you on your driveway. But overall, it's not going to look as snazzy as the triple shredded hardwood mulch. The triple shredded hardwood mulch has that chocolatey brown color when you put it down, and it tends to look a little bit more crisp, and it has that kind of finished kind of look to it, right? Where the wood chips aren't. The wood chips are much easier to spread. They're much easier to load in a wheelbarrow. They're much easier to work with, for sure. They break down pretty quick. So there's that. The wood chips are going to go away faster they're going to disappear much faster than the hardwood bark. For me, that's not an issue because I actually want the stuff to break down to feed the plants. I'm not trying to put some sort of permanent mulch where I'm not going to be mulching. I actually am trying to feed these plants with organic material. Some of the perennials probably aren't going to like those wood chips a whole lot because in order to break down quick as they do lock up a little nitrogen temporarily. It's a little bit oversold on the internet how bad that actually is because it re-releases the nitrogen later. But in the short term, in a short season for a perennial plant to be flowering, that could have a negative impact, right, on how that that's going, how your perennials are going to be slightly off-colored or not performing at their best. But for old, established landscapes with older shrubs, I have no problem whatsoever using the wood chips as the mulch. Not 6 inches deep, 3 or 4 inches of the wood chips. So there's some thoughts on it. I mean, the triple shredded hardwood looks better in a finished landscape. So if it's out by the street or your front foundation or something like that, that might be the material you would use. But I really like using the wood chips for my paths. I like the differentiation between the color from the two. But I totally get the saving money with the chip drop thing, and we'll continue to get wood chips in the future to use here. Let's see, is Biotone okay to use? So Biotone is a fertilizer product that you'll see being sold at most of the garden centers. It's got a small amount of fertilizer, so it's very small amount of nitrogen and other things in it. But it's also a mycorrhizal fungi product that you're applying to in the hole as you're planting a new plant. It's basically an organic plant starter, and it's got the mycorrhizal in it that's supposed to form a relationship with the plant roots and help with all those things. I've always thought it's overall unnecessary to add. Number one, I use Plant Tone, from the same company, and if you read the cover of the Plant Tone bag, it says contains Biotone in it. So I'm already applying some Biotone to the garden anyway. So I find it overall unnecessary. There are people that absolutely swear by it. I sold it at my garden center, not discouraging anything. I actually sold liquid starter fertilizers to people at the garden center over biotone because as a person who was guaranteeing the plants, I knew they were going to water at least once if they bought the liquid one, right? And they mixed it in a jug of water and then watered the plant. So I knew that the plant would get watered by using a liquid organic starter fertilizer. I personally find it unnecessary. The mycorrhizal is in the air. It's in the soil. It's just waiting for the opportunity for your plant to be plugged in and then form that relationship as long as you're taking good care of the soil. I personally find it unnecessary. But again, if it's the kind of thing, it's not hurting anything, and if it's the kind of thing that makes you, if it's a step that you feel that you need to make to, you know, for that $30, $50, $80, $200 plant that you just bought, do it. It's not hurting anything either. I think it's overall unnecessary, especially since I'm already adding it in a fertilizer anyway. Number 5, have you straightened the Vitex yet, and when? They're going to use that info. It's directly behind me back here, and no, I have not straightened it out. You can probably tell it's on a lean and it's up against the house. It's not quite up against the house, but it's close to the house. I've got to get that done in the next few weeks while the soil's still soft. But certainly before the end of January, I should have that video up on straightening up the Vitex. Do we have video that explains the zone change? Yes, we shot a video down at, you can just go over to my main channel page, click on where it says HortTube with Jim Putnam on the screen, wherever that is, while you're watching a video, and then you can just search on the page. We did the horticultural zone map changes or whatever. I can't remember what I titled it. We shot it with Tony Avon. I think it's one of the better videos we did overall last year, because I think it did a pretty good job of explaining the changes in the map. And he had been on the committee the last time the map was updated, so it was good insider information. This person stole their neighbor's leaves before the city took them to Raleigh. Any tips for making leaf mold? If you just want to make leaf mold, you can pile them up, and hopefully we get enough moisture between now and, you know, the fall to, you know, to start breaking them down. They just become mud out on the streets pretty quickly with the rainfall that comes in underneath them along the curbs. You know, that extra water and a little bit of foot traffic, it seems, you know, turns them into leaf mold really quick. I will say that whole leaves break down much slower than chopped up leaves. So if you have some sort of ability to, somebody pointed out last week using a weed eater to break down their leaves, great. Lawnmower, weed eater, some sort of machine that you buy off Amazon that shreds leaves, whatever it is. If you shred them, they will break down faster. But it's not necessarily necessary as long as they're piled high and have some moisture in the pile. The outer part of the shell of it may not look like it's breaking down, but the inner part will definitely break down pretty quickly. Let's see. So somebody said, are there any pH changes in the years since we've started this landscape? I should check that this spring and see. I don't think there will be. I've talked about this in the past. pH changes are almost always temporary. So certainly the composted part of this garden, the upper part, that humus layer that we've built, which is fairly substantial here in the garden, that's probably going to have a pH near neutral. But the plants are rooted down into the clay-based soil down below that, and almost certainly that clay has not changed. The pH of that clay has not changed. I've talked about this in the video that went up yesterday. Oh, no. It was a weekly garden planner video that went up from, that I shot for February, if you own the weekly garden planner. But I talk about in that, about the pH. So there's when I was doing organic lawn care, we were taking some soil tests in the area kind of where I'm at now, inside the Beltline in Raleigh. And there were some really toxic levels of metals in some of the gardens, and we tracked it back to some lime that had been sold for years and years and years, where folks were trying to lime and raise their pH so they could have, that perfect lawn, and the lime had been full of metals, and so it was really high metal. So what they had accomplished was having heavy metals in their garden, but their pH was still exactly the same as it had been before. So the lime had been temporary. those efforts had been temporary and not actually changed it in the long haul, because we get a lot of rain, and so that lime is just getting washed out of the soil. So interestingly, it's very hard to long-term change the pH of your soil. These things have happened over a very, very long period of time. Okay, let's see. But we'll check it this spring, and then we'll know, right? Why bother with a soil test when it's slow, arduous process to change? Why not build it up with leaves, etc., and keep planting and not worry? That's exactly what I do. I don't worry about it all that much. Again, I talked about in last week's video that I'm taking the soil test because I want to know my starting pH, because that allows me to match plants up with that I know that are going to be happy here. And then I'll find out if I have some sort of toxicity issue, or I may again find that I have zero phosphorus. That would be an example. Phosphorus is pretty stable in the ground. I said it's different. pH changes tend to go all over the place. Nitrogen is just all over the place depending on the day you're putting it down or how warm it is outside or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of things that change, the nitrogen. But phosphorus is pretty stable in the ground. And so if I had a soil test come back and I just basically had no phosphorus, I could add rock phosphate. So there may be something I get from a soil test that I would do something about. Unlikely. Okay. When will we do, or can we do more plant family videos? Yes, definitely. We're going to do more plant family videos. We did a few of those a couple of years ago, and I actually enjoy those types of videos. A little bit more overall plant nerdy videos. So expect more of those in the future. It's just basically showing you how their plants in your garden are related, even if they're from different sides of the globe. A lot of the things that are in your garden, are related to one another. And I kind of point that out in some of the tour videos. I pointed out the other day in a video down at Jason Stevens, the Distilleum, that Bayou Bliss Distilleum. I'm pointing over there because I can see it. But that Bayou Bliss Distilleum is in the witch hazel family, and directly above it here in our garden is the Loropetalum, which is also in the witch hazel family. And when I do those videos, you can kind of see those same frilly flowers that witch hazels have. But those are two evergreen members of the witch hazel family from Asia. We have native witch hazels and Asian witch hazels, and it's just kind of interesting. They got separated at some point and became very different plants, but they still have the same flower structure, despite the fact that they're on opposite sides of the globe. So more of those videos to come. This person's Japanese maple didn't go dormant. The sudden onset of cold turned them crispy brown. Is there anything that can be done, or just wait and see? Is there long-term damage? All the Japanese maples did that here. My Japanese maple back here all the Japanese maples back here have the leaves just frozen in place on them. Some years they'll turn, get great coloration, and then drop the foliage, and in other years they get frozen on them like that. This was worse than normal though, because it just stayed warm the entire fall and then went to 22 degrees. So yeah, the only concern that I have, I don't think there's any long-term damage whatsoever. The only concern I have is that when you have leaves on a plant that can be a little structurally weak, those leaves sticking on it, if we were to have some sort of ice-related event, could really put some additional weight. It would be more surface area for ice to gather and more weight on the plant that could cause a problem with it. So if you had an ice storm coming, I might go out to my Tamukiyama Japanese maple and just strip those leaves off of it real quick, because it's small. A big one, obviously, you couldn't do anything about. But that would be my only concern with it. But other than that, yeah, it's just a different kind of year. It's more normal for them to go through that fall coloration, drop the leaves off, and then the cold to come. But it didn't go that way. And will they eventually drop off? The new leaves will just come on and push those old leaves off. And then somebody said the best time to clip off dieback on Japanese maples. I think this was actually from a couple weeks ago, and I skipped it by some. I accidentally skipped a page or something last week. I would wait. Somebody else had answered this. I would just wait till they leaf out in the spring and see how far the dieback actually is, because sometimes you'll see the individual branches. You'll lose 2-3 inches on the of last year's growth for whatever reason. Just wait till it leaves out, and then you'll see what you're dealing with to cut off. The only thing I'm pruning off of them when they're dormant like this is going to be if there's any crossing branches inside the plant, because you can, while there's no leaves on them, you can kind of structurally see the inside of the plant and know what you need to prune off from the inside. But any kind of dead branches on it, I just kind of wait for it to leaf out, and then I'll know what's dead and what's not dead, and I can cut them at that time. So I did add a jacket to the mix. This person is in Southern Pines, North Carolina, Zone 8A. It's probably an hour drive for me to get to Southern Pines, but it's in the Sand Hills area from where we're kind of in the clay area in the Piedmont of North Carolina. It quickly becomes very sandy soils. There's kind of a drop off along the east coast here where all of a sudden it becomes very, very sandy all the way to the coast. Southern Pines is near Pinehurst, where frequently at Pinehurst number 2, the U.S. Open is played there. Anyway, something interesting about that Southern Pines area. It's also hot, very, very hot in the summertime in the Southern Pines area. They want to know about having a Carex Lawn. So basically creating a lawn area. You're not going to be able to put a lot of traffic on any kind of Carex lawn, but you can create the kind of look of a lawn. You can use dwarf mondo grass for this. I actually have a dwarf mondo grass video coming up if you're in a shady area. And then you could use Carexes as well. There's 3,000 species of Carex, something like that on the planet, and 500 of them right here in North America. And again, I've said a few times, it's like a plant that people just walked over in the woods for the first, couple hundred years of horticulture in America, and then all of a sudden found them as great ornamental plants. And we're seeing more and more Carex and Carex hybrids and European, a lot of breeding in Europe between species from all over the planet. It's really kind of interesting how Carex is just, I talked to somebody who has a grass plug nursery, and they said they didn't have any Carex 20 years ago in their lineup, and now they have more Carexes than actual grasses, which is kind of wild. So my suggestion here would be to go on to the Mount Cuba Center website. Sam and the folks at the Mount Cuba Center did a Carex study and talk about the values of using them as lawns, or the most drought tolerant ones and the most ones that would take a little bit of foot traffic and that kind of thing. That's where I would investigate. They did a lot of species in that study. Investigate the Carex that you might use for your lawn in Southern Pines, but use the Mount Cuba Center studies. They're super, super interesting, and they really put plants through the test. We were there. We had a full day, and I didn't record it. I didn't record a video there. I just was with a bunch of plant nerds up in Pennsylvania back in August, early August. It was really super fun. Made a few new friends that were going to visit this year, native plant nursery friends. And it was just a fun day. Sam gave us basically a whole day, and we toured the Mount Cuba Center. And it was just, learned a ton from that place, and it's just a great asset, and their website is as well. Okay. So somebody's asking about large hollies. Let's say the specs on a holly, say they get 15 feet tall and 10 feet wide or something like that. Can they keep it more like 8x6, or should it be moved to a better spot? So yes, you can absolutely shear any broadleaf holly kind of any size or shape you want it. Even upright ones you could probably keep as round balls. They'll get spiky growth on them, but you can do pretty much anything you want to do. The issue will be is how much do you care about the red berries? Because there's no great time to prune these large growing hollies, because they tend to still have their berries on them right now, and they're only a few weeks away from blooming right now. So there's like this, when is the window to prune them? There isn't really a great window. So for me, I'd rather put one where it can get big if I'm trying to get the berries on them. If I don't care as much, then you can leave them in the spot you have it and just shear it whenever you want to shear. Shear it between March and July, somewhere in that window. You can size control it however you want, but you're going to sacrifice something by doing that. This person they want to reduce their lawn in their front yard, and they have a shallow culvert with about a 2-foot slope, and it's 1 foot wide. So they got a ditch out by the road. It's kind of small, but it's a ditch by the road. Is there any way to integrate their design without lawn and keep it that way? So, you could plant some native plants along that ditch, native grasses up higher, things like clethra and itea, and a lot of our native shrubs actually grow in seasonally wet spaces. So you can integrate the ditch into a native planting. I will tell you that it's probably going to have a slightly weedy look to it in time. All of those plants, given those kinds of conditions, can be very suckery, they won't look neat and finished. And if it's out by your front, where people are driving by, I don't know that that's what you'd want to do, but I will tell you it's definitely possible to grow. A lot of our native plants grow in seasonally wet spaces. So you have lots of options for things you could plant in that ditch and slow that water down or whatever you're trying to ultimately accomplish, but it won't look neat and orderly. I lived on a corner lot at the old house, and I kept the ditch as turf, weedy, just weeds. I say turf loosely. It was just mowed weeds, and there was some zoysia grass in it. Actually, going back to that zoysia question, I maintained my zoysia lawn as a weedy zoysia lawn. I just didn't care. It was green enough, and that's how I did it. But I left my ditches as mowed grass, and I actually mowed it fairly tall so I wasn't losing soil when it rained going through that ditch. But I think for me, that was the decision I made. I had 90% of a 3/4 acre lot was bed space, and the only grass I had was the ditch, really. So that's the way I did it. So yes, it's possible to convert that ditch to something ornamental, but a lot of the things that may grow in that type of space may not be like perfect little balls kind of stuff. Okay, which may or may not matter to you. Okay, somebody just said any volunteer work a 12-year-old can do in the garden, loves growing vegetables. So I had Steph write this down because I go back and think, my next door neighbor here has hired a guy like 4 times this year to come with a backpack blower and blow the leaves out of his yard. I don't know how much this guy charges, but for like hours, he uses a backpack blower and blew all the leaves out over here. When I was 12 years old, I was working at a tobacco farm during the summertime, and I was carrying a rake around the neighborhood and raking leaves, in the fall, and we were pushing a mower. Me and my stepbrother were pushing a mower around and knocking on doors in the summertime. I kind of just don't know where that went. It's a strange phenomenon to me that, if I was just such a hustler at 12 years old, just out, trying to, I've always felt like money was, bought you a little bit of freedom when you're a teenager or a preteen, so we were just knocking on doors. Man, if I was here and I was 13 or 14 now, I could make a fortune in this neighborhood raking leaves, and get them all out to the street for these folks before the machines come and rake them up. But I just don't know where that's gone. It's a strange thing to me that there aren't kids knocking on doors, asking for side jobs and what can I do to help you out and all of those kinds of things. So whether it's volunteer work or any kind of work, a 12-year-old is 12 to 15, 16-year-old is perfectly capable of getting out and hustling and learning and getting involved, in gardening or whatever you can help your neighbors with, really. And also putting a little money in your pocket to buy yourself a little bit of freedom and not have to ask mom and dad for the money for everything. It's just a strange phenomenon. It's probably a bit preachy on my part, but that's a strange change to me. I understand like Lowe's and Home Depot really changed like the hardware store model, because I worked at a hardware store when I was 14 and a half, and I could get my learner's permit or my work permit in Raleigh. I worked at a True Value hardware store, and those hardware stores would hire young people, and we just don't get that with some of the stores now. They won't hire people that are younger to do some of the jobs that we were able to get when we were 14 or 15 or 16. But certainly you can take a rake or a lawnmower and knock on some neighbors' houses and hustle some money that way. Anyway, so somebody has a spongy, squishy, boggy space in their garden and wants to know how to take care of it. I wouldn't know without seeing it at all what kind of conditions you have that are the reason that this thing is boggy or squishy. Had Steph write this question down because I have said this in the past. If you have drainage related issues with slopes that you're trying to figure out how to control, obviously, again, you can sometimes lean on native plants in those spaces that will perform well in those seasonally wet spaces. They won't dry it up. I get that question all the time. What can I plant in it that will dry it up? Anything you plant in it, it's probably going to keep it more wet because it's going to slow water down getting out of it. It's going to shade the ground. It's literally going to keep it more wet probably. But there are times where you may need to hire somebody. And the way that homes are built now in subdivisions so close together, there's so much roof space and there's, driveway and sidewalks and patios and everything else. There's so much impervious surface that where we got 42 inches of rain in Raleigh or something last year, some of these houses are covering so much of the lot that's like 90 inches of rain, in the available land for that water to get into the ground. So it's going to keep places wet. It's going to cause problems, a lot of problems. That may be the time that you actually hire somebody or have somebody come in and do a little bit of grading work that may help with those drainage things. That's the main thing I wrote that thing down from. I don't know. This is what I did as a landscaper, though. I came in and solved drainage problems because there's a lot of drainage problems when you force this much impervious surface into a small space. This person is in 6B, 7A, bought several Encore Azaleas on clearance, and they didn't have a chance to plant them, so now they're in their 40-degree basement with 8 to 12 hours of light. They're losing some leaves where they flush back out in the spring in those spots. Yes, but you'll have to prune them to make that happen, so wait until after they bloom in the spring, and then you can prune them a bit and plant them at the same time. So you might just enjoy the flowers in the container. Bring them out on days you can. So there's going to be days between now and April that you'll be able to bring them outside. So do that when you can. Like we had all those really cold temperatures, and then we got quite warm for a week. Those Encore Azaleas could have been outside during that time. It'd probably be helpful to them to get some, even though this is 8 to 10 hours of light, I don't know if it's direct sun in any kind of way. And in the wintertime, even though you're with the leaves off the trees, you're getting some direct light on the plants out here. So I think it'll be helpful to bring them out when you can between now and then. Let them flower, and then you can prune them, and that will help fill them in. But that's the time to prune azaleas. Let's see. So somebody has their primroses bloom super early, and other plants too. They're in California. There's a lot of that going on. Like every cherry tree in this neighborhood is blooming right now. They usually divide them after blooming in the spring. Is it safe to divide them now or safer in the spring? I'd still wait till the spring. So regardless of the fact that they bloom too early or not, I just stick with your same schedule of dividing them. Somebody asked, okay, so there's another question on this similar. Somebody bought an Ackerman hybrid camellia in Buffalo, New York. The Ackerman hybrids are camellias that are supposed to be more cold hardy, zone 6 cold hardy. There's several of them, and there's a couple of these series of camellias that are reputedly more cold hardy. They didn't want to put it in the ground in the fall. Is it okay to leave it in the garage until February? In the original container, yes, but again, days you can bring it out, bring it out. I don't know if there's a lot of those days in Buffalo necessarily in the wintertime, but if there is days that are above freezing, even 38 degrees is fine. As long as it's above freezing and that root ball's not going to freeze solid, it's better off outside some during the wintertime than it is in that garage the entire winter. Okay. Somebody said when to prune green giants. I put that green giant arborvitae video up this week, and I talked about pruning them, but I didn't talk about when to prune them. So those conifers like that, I think anytime in the late winter, in the early spring, and all the way till about middle summer, that's the times to prune them. Keep in mind, if you prune a conifer hard in the middle of summer, you're going to torch the inside of it with sun. So light pruning by midsummer. Heavy pruning would be done earlier in the spring, but that's kind of the window to prune any of those plants that you're not really growing for flowers. You can just kind of prune them anytime between March and early July, something like that. So somebody asked if their Little Miss Figgy fig is okay as a container plant in Atlanta, Georgia, outside. Yes, but figs are not the most cold tolerant things in the world, and they're not going to. They need. When I grew lots of figs at my nursery. Figs are something that we gave a little bit of extra cold protection to because of the. They're just not as root hardy overall, so they were packed together, and then they had a couple covers on them, or they were in some sort of hoop house of some kind. So keep in mind, it's perfectly fine to have it in a container in Atlanta, Georgia, but outside in the wintertime, you're going to have a few nights that are going to need to be protected. It's not going to, like this week, we have a span of about 5 days where the high temperature is only going to be like 40 for the entire week. So that means there's going to be days where that pot would never thaw out. That would be problematic for a fig. Can you do a video with Jenny and Jerry? We have a couple videos with Jenny and Jerry. We've visited them twice now. I visited them the first time, and then Steph visited them with me the second time. So we have videos on their channel and on my channel with Jenny and Jerry over there in Dallas, North Carolina. Who knows, we may visit them again at some point. So last question for this week. Again, I think if you're going to think about coming to the open garden, you're probably going to want to get tickets sooner than later, because like 50 out of 600 sold in a brief mention of it on Friday's video. Let's see. So this was just a general question about the upcoming cold. They're about to get hammered with snow and ice, followed by 0 temps. Any before, during, or after garden-wise tips? I talked about a little bit in yesterday, as you're watching this video, about a little bit. If you have things that you planted this fall that are like marginal in your area, and I mean marginal like you're in zone 7 and the thing's only hardy up to zone 7, that might be something you throw a cover over on a week like this. The problem is you need to do that after the snow or ice, though. When it snows, that snow can get down. Some of the snow can get down through the plant and not add. They'll add protection to the roots. Okay. But if I put the cover on it, all the snow gets trapped onto the top, and that weight can be problematic and break the plants. So we don't want to do more damage we don't want to protect them to death. I guess that's what we should call that, protecting to death. So let the snowfall happen. Snow is a good insulator. Don't know if it's enough of an insulator to protect your plants, but if you have something you feel like is marginal, there's no reason after the snow falls not to go out and throw a sheet over top of it, or a blanket over top of it, or a piece of plastic over top of it. If you use plastic, get it off the next day so it doesn't heat up under there. We don't want to wake the plants up. We're not trying to create heat. We're just trying to hold in about 5 or 10 degrees overnight. And the snow is a good overall insulator. If you have ice-related things, it may be a good idea to just keep an eye on. I've got a few weeping plants in this garden, and we tend to have more ice events here in Raleigh than we have snow events. So when that happens, I'll be out in the garden knocking some ice off a branch here or there. Again, not trying to protect them to death. If you shake it too hard, you're going to break it. But I'll try to knock some of the weight off of a few things that could be in jeopardy by having weight added to them. So, there's some thoughts on it. If you're concerned about it, just go throw a sheet over top of it. It's not that big of a deal. It'll add 5 or 10 degrees to it overnight that night. That snow blanket that's on the ground underneath it should help as well. And it's really about getting them through. A lot of times it's about getting them through that first winter. We have that big upright Indian hawthorn in the front garden. I'm not worried about it anymore. The first 2 years it was in the ground, I was very concerned about it. Now that it's really heavy, woody plant, I'm not going to be concerned about it anymore going forward. Talked about some stuff about that the other day. Some of these things that have now matured to the point they can take colder temperatures than they originally could. But that first year or two, if it's stressful, just throw a sheet over it. Thanks for watching, guys.